Projects. Sorry, that Boxer Projects is located on the unceded lands of the Kauai, the Chemehuevi, and the Serrano people. We're very grateful to be doing our work here and invite you to consider the land that you are on. So welcome very much to this presentation by Marion Landry. Marion has been in residency here at Boxer Projects in Joshua Tree for the past 2 months and has had an amazingly productive time. We had a wonderful open studio here this last Saturday, and Marion will take you through her process and the results and the future for this project in about a minute. Just to say, Boxo Projects is a residency, as you might surmise, in Joshua Tree, California. We're also a programming initiative and produce something we're reluctant to call a biennial, but is a biennial, called the Joshua Triennial. Please sign up for our mailing list if you're interested in following our programming. And we look forward to meeting you in person at some time in the future. So without further ado, I'd love to turn it over to Marion Landry for her artist talk.
Thank you, Bernard. Awesome. Nice to meet you all virtually, and thanks for being here with me today. So I will, like Bernard mentioned, describe my project here. So here's a small outline. I'll talk to you about my practice just to situate yourself and give you some information. I'll describe my project that I had proposed to do here. I'll discuss the research that I've done, my findings, the painting process and production, and also the site responsive installation, which concluded my residency. And there'll be a small period for question and answer at the end of the talk. You're more than welcome to prepare your question in advance, type them in the chat, or voice them whichever way you feel more comfortable. So without further ado, so I'm Marion Landry. I'm a Francophone artist. I'm originally from Montreal. I do live now in produce work in Vancouver, BC. And I'm an oil painter, and my practice is inspired by light phenomena. So I observe the light phenomena in the environment and translate them further into abstract paintings. It is research-based, but it's embodied research. So embodied research means I go out into the elements, into nature, I observe, I look, I document, I feel, I sense, and later I bring that back to the studio and interpret it into paintings. My language is geometrical. I've been doing geometrical abstraction since 2015, and my work is also gridded. So there's a grid element into my work that is quite important. And the main reason for that is because I do not use any tape to create those very sharp lines that you're seeing. Everything is traced by hand and freehand painted after. So you'll see that when I start talking about my process. My work is also light responsive, so it gets read and interpreted and perceived different way depending on the lighting that it's being exhibited in. I also work with matte and glossy finishes, so the work, depending on your viewing angle and the lighting condition, can be read and interpreted different ways. It is meditative and sensory in the sense that I like to present my work in site responsive installation, which use light, temperature, and traditional painting technique. And you could see the images on screen is one example of that. Many more examples on my website if you're curious. But in this installation, this is the project I've done at the Griffin Art Project in North Vancouver in 2023, where I actually met Bernard, who was a curator in residence. And in this installation, you could see gels in the windows that are installed, which changes the temperature of the studio. You could see paintings, and you can also see tape on the ground, which was actually tracing the light pattern coming into the studio. So this is one example of the type of work I do. Now, the project that I have proposed here at in Joshua Tree, it was for Sorry, let me repeat that. So the project that I proposed was to respond to the lighting condition and environmental context of the residency, and it was to be based on embodied research. So I had to come here not knowing what to paint, and I spent time observing and engaging with the land through daily walks, wildlife, and sky observation, and came up with some ideas. And mostly I studied the shifting quality of light, particularly at dawn and dusk. And then the residency was concluded by a site responsive installation. And like Bernard mentioned, I've been here for almost 2 months now. I'm leaving on December 16th. So during that time, obviously, there was a change in the season, there's a time change, and the weather shifted quite drastically. It was quite hot at the beginning compared to where we are now. So to situate you, this is where Boxel Project is located. We're on Highway 62. We are sitting at the boundary of the Joshua and behind us, there's rock formations. And in front of me, I could see the Yucca Valley, the Dry Lake, and a mountain range. It's slightly different than what I would describe as a mountain range. It feels more like a pile of rocks than anything else. And you see also the road system here is very gridded. The highway runs from east to west, north, south, very much like a grid. And when you're looking at the landscape, you actually see the grid system quite visibly. It is mostly sand roads where I'm at exactly. It's somewhat of a residential neighborhood, and most of the property are about 5 acre. So here's the condition of the studio. So when I first arrived, I spent some time observing the lighting conditions of the studio because I needed to figure out what was happening. So I opened up the garage door, look at the studio under natural light, close the garage door, see the impact of the lighting on that, and also looked at the light under artificial light. And from my observation, well, first, there's no direct sunlight that was coming in the studio. So I decided to work mostly with the garage door open under kind of a bluish ambient light. Now the desert itself, the site. So like I explained, dirt roads, small bushes, some Joshua tree in the environment. The landscape is very dry at this time of the year. Very, very different than what I'm used to. It felt really barren at the beginning, not much activity, very quiet, not a lot of sound. We are quite high on altitude. We're at 2,758 feet of altitude, and it's quite wide and open. And behind me, there's these rock formation that kind of frame my view. And I spent considerable amount of time observing those bushes and different plant life, which at this point kind of look almost dead or very dry, but they're not. They're very thriving and alive. When you go closer, you actually realize that they're alive and doing well and quite colorful. But it takes time to kind of like get to used to the different landscape. And what's important, it's also that everything is really prickly and you don't really want to touch it because it's some of it could be dangerous. So you end up staying on the road and not really going off the road because you don't want to get pricked or disturb the landscape that is quite fragile at this point. Now, about the wildlife, when I first arrived, the thing that struck me was that the mornings were really quiet. Coming from Vancouver, you know that it's the morning because the birds are so loud. We have crows and seagulls, and even the bald eagles are quite loud in the morning. Whereas here, when I would wake up in the morning, I didn't hear any sound. So I thought, God, there's not even a bird here. Like, who lives here, But nature reveals itself very slowly, mostly because nature is the same color than the landscape. So within the first week, I actually was able to observe the bighorn sheep. Now, those are very hard to see because they're exactly the same color as the rocks. So you have to pay very close attention to see them. But when they do show up, it's a privilege and they're so majestic. There's also quite a few birds here, and those that I witnessed the most were the hummingbird. Again, not very loud birds and not very visible, so you really have to pay attention. But there's actually probably a couple of or two or three family living on this particular land, and I've seen many more around them, and they're quite beautiful. The things that I saw the most was the cottontail rabbits. They kind of like go away when you start walking in the sand, create sound, and you see them, their little white tail go away. I also saw jackrabbits. Those are also very hard to see because they're quick, they're very quiet. You don't hear them. I wonder how walking on the sand for me is so loud, but none of the animal makes sense, make any noise. And then also I saw the coyotes. There's three living in close proximity, so I would see them often in the morning. Again, they're the same color as the landscape, so you really have to pay attention. Everything is slow coming and slow revealing, but it's here and it's thriving and it's very much alive. But the thing that made the biggest impact on me was the vastness of the sky and the quality of the changing light, especially in the morning at dawn and at dusk. So what I witnessed is that the crack of dawn is very early, about 5 a.m., and it's a very long period of an hour and a bit before sunset where the color and the lighting in the landscape starts to appear. And that feeling of the landscape coming to life and being colored by the sun very slowly was quite of an experience. And I wanted to start working with that. Then sunset is very short, it's about 10-15 minutes, and then it's daylight. It's like just blue open sky. And because there's nothing blocking my view, there's no big trees, there's not a lot of shadows, there's just like, the vastness of the sky was quite impressive. And the way it made me felt a certain way as well, depending on that time of the day. Golden hour just before sunset is very quick and not that noticeable here. Then the sun goes behind the rock formation, sets at around 4:30, and then twilight. The period of twilight is quite majestic and long. It's about an hour where you really see the night rises, so the dark blue is at the bottom of the sky, and then slowly it takes over the whole sky, and that's quite impressive. It goes from a light lavender to a silver to a deep purple until it becomes nighttime. Night is very dark. I don't think I've experienced darker nights than here. The Joshua Tree is a dark park, so people are quite sensitive about light here. So there's no light post on the street, there's no light posts on the highway. People tend to have very dim light on their property. So stargazing is quite impressive. So with all of these discovery, the things that I wanted to keep was that slow coming. The desert really revealed itself gradually over time. The more I give, the more I receive. The more time I give, the more information I receive. It's quite of a minimalistic view, monochromatic in tone. So there's that I wanted to carry over my painting. The vastness of the sky, like I mentioned, had a big impression, and I wanted to carry that over. The notion of time kind of shifted for me here. It felt like the time was more expansive. There was more time in the day. And I don't know if because the vastness of the sky or because I had less things to do than be in the studio here, maybe a mix of both, but I wanted to carry that over my production. And the light absorption and shimmering effect. So what I've noticed here is that the landscape is extremely matte. The plants are dry, there's sand everywhere. I couldn't find any surface that was reflective or glossy. And it took me a while before I discovered the shimmering effect. So I'll touch back on that once we get into the painting production. So at the beginning of my production, I wanted to do a focus on the sky, and I established four different states of the sky. So dawn, day, twilight, and night. And those are the states that I wanted to include in my painting. And then, yeah, and then with that, also, I explained that my work is gridded. So the grid is always depending on the project. It changes the size of the grid. So for this particular project, the residency a main house here has a chain link fence, which has a 2 by 2 metal grid on it. So I decided to use that to work with the land and to use that as the foundation grid for my painting series. Before I get into a large painting, I do a lot of smaller scale to ash out a lot of the details in terms of color, in terms of matte or glossy finishes and the ratio of them, in terms of composition, in terms of geometrical shape that I will be using. And the main two elements for the sky series that I wanted to base the geometrical shape on was this idea of the road really imposing themselves on the landscape and creating this strong grid system. So the vertical line that you see is kind of my interpretation of the road system. And I also wanted to speak about the absence of shadow or the spiky and very narrow shadow that the landscape has. And this was interpreted with the triangle shape. Before, also, I settled on some color. I traveled with some pigments, but I don't always know which pigment's going to give me the color that I'm after. So I do extensive tests on figuring out the colors as well. And when I first arrived here, I discovered two new whites. So I don't know if there's any painters in the crowd, but I normally work with zinc white, which is a very transparent white that doesn't really have a lot of oomph. And then to give it a bit more vibrancy, I normally use a titanium white, which is a really bright and opaque white. But here I discovered a flake white and a radiant white, which I had never worked before. It's from Gamblin, the brand. So I had to do a bunch of tests to figure out which white to use. And I ended up using for this production a mix of zinc and radiant white, which give me the right vibrancy, the right amount of brightness, but still would allow me to work with transparent. So for the Sky series, what I wanted the work to be was about slowness. I wanted the rigid grid system of the roads. I wanted the narrow shadow and spiky shadow, and I also wanted the work to feel expansive and vast. So you see here the first layer of the four sky painting in the studio. You'll notice that they are stretched on the wall and not on stretchers. And the reason for that is that because my work is gridded and traced by hand, I prefer working on a hard surface so the canvas doesn't bounce and I could trace easier. So I stretch the work directly on the wall and paint it directly on the wall. And once the painting is finished, then I stretch it on the stretcher. So that obviously needs a certain amount of precision, but with my work, it's fine by me because I'm quite of a precise person. So you see the first layer here, and in the first layer, there's a different finish for each. So daytime was very matte and not a lot of shadow. So I wanted the day painting to be very matte. So I use a specific technique with the gesso to allow it to keep the grittiness of the canvas. And then for dawn and twilight, I want it to be slightly shiny because there is a little bit of shimmering at that time of the day. So I wanted the work to be somewhat a little satin finish. And for the night piece, because of the twinkling of the star, for me, I interpreted that as a bit more glossy. So definitely the glossier of all the paintings. Now the foundation color is a bit more vibrating and a bit more contrast in color because it will be covered by the second layer. So now you see this is the day painting and you'll see the grid is traced. Now it's hard to document the grid because the grid is always part of the work, but not that uh, stark, not that strong. So I'm normally using a color that's present in the piece to trace it. So I use a color pencil, and but I leave it in the work. And if you go close to the work, you will see the grid, but at far read, you won't see the grid. So it's there, but not that imposing. Now you see the painting finished but not stretched in the studio with the road and the shadow element, which I see as the vertical line and the triangle. Maybe it's hard to see in this photograph itself, but the triangle actually changes for each of the piece. For the dawn painting, it's a 2-inch wide triangle with the point at the bottom. The daytime, because the shadows are so narrow during the day and very not apparent, I narrow that triangle to 1 inch. And then for twilight, I actually reverse the triangle because the sun kind of moves during the day. So the triangle points up. And for the night piece, I widen the triangle quite a bit to 4 inch, I believe. And that was to speak about the full moon, the full moon effect. So you'll see that in the night piece, there is a moon that appear. That's very new to me. I'm not normally that literal in my work. I also don't use circle. So, but the first week that I was here, I got a very spectacular full moon, which made a huge impression on me. So it appeared in my work and I decided to roll with it. So you see the painting here, once there's finally fully dry, I stretch them on stretcher and you see them all cleaned up and finished. Now, like I explained earlier, my work is very light sensitive. So, a digital photo gives you kind of some sort of a one view, but there is multiple view on the work. And you'll see more in images when I show you the image of the install and you'll see how it changes with the light quality. Now, obviously, while I'm painting and body research continues, and it's the second full moon because I've been here by then about 6 weeks, and quite a beautiful full moon, but not as spectacular as the first one. And what happened is that I start walking at different time of the day because we entered time change. And what happened is that I noticed that with this idea that the landscape was so matte, I kept thinking about that. But what happened is if I go walk towards the end of the day, like a couple hours before sunset, when the sun starts to be lower, I noticed that the creosote bushes, they have these little seed pod that are furry. And I noticed that at that time of the day, they start to glisten and shimmer in the landscape with the light passing through with the low angle. And that made me notice that actually the sand also does the same effect. It shimmer as well. There's quartz in the sand, and I guess with the low sun ray, it catches the low angle, and then the land and the sand started to shimmer. And I also noticed it in the cholla tree. So the shimmering effect was very slow at revealing itself. And then I started to see it in the morning and I started to notice it at different time and different effect and different emphases on the shimmering. Now, the creosote bushes is quite of an interesting bush. It's been around for 15,000 years. A lot of people talk a lot about it here. It's a very interesting, but without wanting to go too much into the history of the creosote, what I did notice is that up close, when you're looking at the branch, is there's like stripe on it, and it's very kind of like geometrical, if you want to call it in my language, but very kind of lined based. And also it appears kind of gray because there's not a lot of green left in the creosote at this time of the year. But upon closer look, there's actually a lot of yellow and peach in it. So I decided to go with these color for the last series of my work, which I title Hommage au Créosote. Now, I like to title my work in French just to pay homage to my original language. So Hommage au Créosote was a very minimal series. It used a light gray, a light yellow, a peach, and a darker gray. And it's the largest piece of the collection. It is horizontal. At first, I haven't worked horizontal or landscape format in a very long time. It's 72 inches wide by 36 inches. And I really wanted that piece to be shimmering and light dependent. I also did those four accompanying piece where I broke down the four colors separately to really try to figure out how to do this shimmering on it. So at this point, I'm getting close to the end of my production. The studio is full. The sky paintings are drying. The homage to the creosote are in the process. There's a lot of studies happening and shifting all the time because I'm still trying to figure out how to achieve this shimmering effect. You see the first layer of these two paintings here. And what I did to create the shimmering effect is that I worked on a really matte first layer and I sanded it down. So sanding the painting adds this kind of layer of distress, almost if you think about a pair of jeans where it starts to be old a bit and it's got this used look on the, on the front. So the painting has a little bit of that texture. It's very smooth to the touch, but it has this very smooth and kind of a little bit of a distressed look. And then I did another layer using cold wax, which emphasized this matteness. And the top layer, I painted it with a satin finish, but very, very thinly and very close in color. So the painting itself comes across as very minimalistic. You see these stripes going through of minimal color, but it really comes to life when you see it in the proper lighting. And it really shimmers as you walk through or from, or if you change your viewing angle or your distance. So that was quite well executed for the shimmering effect. And those are the small pieces that accompany the work. One stretch, they're easier to understand. So they have an 8-inch band of this satin finish, which again gives it this shimmering effect. You see it installed here in the studio, and as you can tell, the yellow becomes almost beige. The pink sometime the peach sometime read as pink, sometime looks a bit more saturated, sometime more pale. The light gray is the one actually that changes the most. At times it looks white, sometimes it's gray, sometimes it looks cloudy, and then the dark gray is the one that has the most shimmering effect apparent. So each have their own identity and effect going. So let's roll into the final part of my residency, which was a site-responsive installation of painting, light, sound notes, 2 benches, 2 seats, a bunch of pillows and blanket to make the seating comfortable, and a portion of the chain link fence. The presentation was from 2 to 5, so we catch the end of the day, a little bit of the golden hour, sunset, and twilight. So the light changed quite a bit over time, which was quite spectacular. You see a close-up on the Boxo land, which is a 5-acre property in a rectangular shape. There's the main house. The studio is the building in between, and I was staying in the small guest house. And because the work was so tied to the environment and the context of the gallery, it was important for me to put it back into the context. So I decided to install some work inside the studio, but most of the painting were installed outside. So I used the outside wall of the studio. I used one wall of the main house and one wall of the guest house. So here's the installation in the studio. So we had the painting on the same wall that they had been produced. And it was important for me to place them there because that's where they have been created, envisioned. And really, once the garage door is open, you see this relationship with the sky quite obviously, and also the chain link for the grid foundation. So I wanted that relationship to be very clear to the people that would attend the show. And I put the 3 pieces there. Now you see as I change my angle, you see different things in the painting. Like I said, a bit hard to document. You really have to experience these pieces in live because it really gives you so much more when you see them. Now, the day of the opening was a spectacular day. It was quite saturated, blue sky, very expansive, very sunny, very warm. It was 19 degrees. It was quite comfortable. It was a really good day to show my work and really tie the sky into the painting that I had done. And I think that was quite clear for the people that were here. You see in the context of some of the people, we're entering kind of golden hour now. You see that the lighting quality changes and it becomes quite more saturated and yellow. I had also installed in the studio a series of those 11 by 14 oil on paper just to talk about process and research and how I had arrived at the paintings and to give a bit more information about the composition and the geometrical shape that I had used and the exploration that led to it. And then on the outside wall of the studio, the main wall was the homage to the creosote with a bench. And now this work was quite interesting because it shifted quite a bit during the day, and you could just sit on this on the bench for about 5 to 10 minutes, and you see the shift, especially after 3 p.m. So that was quite spectacular. So depending on what time of the day I document this work, it looks completely different. Now, you're probably wondering why I put that large painting really close to the end of the wall. And what I was trying to do by that was to really tie in the landscape to the painting. So you see that the color in the rock and in the background are very much present in the work. And there's also a creosote bush in the background that you could also see the seeds and the impact and the relationship between those two. So I think that was a bit more obvious. Now, that specific day is not the day of the opening, so it was slightly overcast that day, which is not common. There was a veil of cloud, which allowed me to capture the color of the painting and not so much the shimmering effect. And then on the guest house, you see night, the painting at the background. And the reason why I want to install night in the guest house is that when I arrived in Joshua Tree, everybody was telling me about stargazing and how impressive was the night. And they had recommended that I go for a walk at night or drive my car to the park. And a full disclosure, I'm totally terrified of the dark. So it's not like me to take the car and go for a drive at night in a park that has no cell phone reception. So the only experience of the night sky was from the comfort of my front porch. This is the place that I witnessed the full moon. This is where I stargaze. This is where I listen to the sound of the wildlife at night. So it was important for me to put the painting back into the context that it had been created and envisioned in my mind. So here's a later photo of the day that's taken the day of the open studio. So the sun is just about to go behind the rock formation. We're very much in blue light at this point in the shadow. The painting looked completely different. The experience of it was changing very drastically as the day was going by. You see a different angle of the night painting. I had put seats there for people to be able to see the painting and the sky and really draw these parallel. There is seating throughout the installation because to me it's important that I suggest a certain viewing angle for my work. So I'm quite strategic about the placement of the seating. It's important for me as well that the seating is comfortable and cushy. So you actually want to sit there for a few minutes and kind of contemplate and spend time with the work and maybe see things that you couldn't see better or find things within yourself that you didn't know better before. So here's another viewing angle of the night piece. And then this is a funny story. So the dawn painting, aube in French. There's actually two of them because the first time that I painted it, I was at the beginning of my residency. It was really warm. It felt like a nice summer night, and I ended up painting quite late that day. And I was cleaning up my brushes, and the garage door is open, and I had a conversation with Bernard. It was such a lovely evening, and I didn't really think much of it. I closed the garage door and I went home. And the next day when I came back, well, the when you paint in these very vibrant peachy color or color close to flowers and stuff like that, it attracts moth. And so, especially with the artificial light turned on in the garage late at night. When I discovered the work the next day, there was about 20 moths all over the pieces, and they had tried to escape and weren't able to, and had lost little wings and legs, and it was just a complete disaster. And because it was really warm at that time, the paint had dried overnight. So it was a bit of a disaster. I tried to take them off. I couldn't. So I decided to sand them, but I had to sand all the way back to the gesso in certain areas. So it became all patchy. And I just got so frustrated. So I ripped the painting off the wall. I moved it to another location and I decided to repaint it completely. And when I repainted it, because my color are all mixed, I mix a lot more because I don't want to run out. So there was a leftover paint at the end. So I ended up doing a second layer on the piece that had been damaged by the moth. And I ended up developing two pieces actually and carry them all the way to a final product. And they are slightly different. Obviously, they're not clone. This is not digital representation, but an organic painting. So one is slightly more peachy, the other one slightly more yellow. One, the sky is a bit more vibrant and what we see in the paint in the picture right now. The other one is a bit more subdued, and they also have different geometrical patterns. So one have two vertical line, and the triangle is in a slightly different location. So that one, the second aube, was installed on the main house, and it was actually quite glowing and quite impressive what it did and how it responded to the light quality. And it changed it quite drastically as twilight set in. So you see it in the twilight now when the sky started to rise. So you see the dark blue at the bottom of the sky is kind of the night rising, and then it takes over the whole sky. And here's a shot of the studio kind of during that twilight moment. So we're probably around 4:15, 4:20 at this point, where I had to turn the artificial light inside the studio. I turned them towards the end of it because it was important for me that the painting were mostly experienced under natural light. But at this time, I had to turn them on. So you see the impact of that in the twilight environment. Part of the installation also had sound notes. Now, when I do the embodied research, even though I do a lot of digital documentation, I find that the digital documentation doesn't actually give me an idea about the color or the impression or how I felt. And there's a lot of information missing. So I've taken an habit to record myself, record my impression, record my feeling, record the things that I'm thinking about. And I accumulate quite a bit of these voice notes. And I don't normally share them with the public. They're for myself. I play them back into the studio when I start mixing my color to remember what those colors were and those feelings. But because a lot of you are not here in Joshua Tree and are following me from Montreal or Vancouver or other places in the States, and I wanted to give you an opportunity to really kind of connect to the desert environment and get another way to enter this very particular and unique place. So in the voice notes, I published four of them and made them available for the Open Studio. They're in my website. There's a specific section for the Boxwell residency on my website, and you can go there and scroll down and click on the notes. But you'll hear in the notes some of the wind, some of the birds. You hear my footstep in the sand, and it gives you this kind of sensory experience, like another layer of sensory experience that kind of help you understand and read the work. So this is pretty much all I have for you today. I hope this was giving you more insights and information about how I go about painting and creating this body of work. You can find more information on my website if you want to. I've posted a lot of in progress photo on my Instagram. You can also go to the Boxo projects and please consider supporting Boxo. All the money goes towards supporting art project like mine, Residency, the Triennial. It's a really good organization. The time that I have spent here was really well supported, and the opportunity was very amazing. So I really want this to continue for other artists after me. So consider that. And with that, if you have questions and would like to um, either type them or raise your hand, and I will get to you and answer all of your questions. Don't know if there's some in the I'll give you guys a few minutes to gather your thoughts.
Uh, can you see me?
Yes, I can
Can you
hear
hear
you and
me?
see you. Yeah.
Hi.
Hi, Landon.
I'm here with Paloma, who works with Marion in Vancouver.
Hi, Paloma.
Well, we've been taking apart a big painting, watching your talk, and it was so nice to get a feeling for the space and the light. And I'm also just sort of amazed how much work you got done because most of us land at a residency and go, ah. Bernard, I think really was it was wonderful, Bernard, that you invited Marion down. I think it's been just a great intervention into the next phase of her light and space painting world and practice. So, and we miss you all in Vancouver. It's
Thanks.
not really sunny today, but it's still light. Anyway, I just wanted to congratulate you and both of you for putting this together and the vision to do it. And some of the pictures of the desert were just so mind blowing for us.
Yeah.
We're out here in the rainforest, so.
Yeah, it was so different. It was very striking when I was speaking with people from Vancouver actually on FaceTime because the backdrop was so different, the light quality was so different, and it really emphasized the differences when I was, on FaceTime because you could see it kind of side by side. So that was quite interesting, and I completely forgotten about the darkness and the wetness of Vancouver. Funny how it just escapes your mind and you forget about it, but it's been quite impressive. I had never been in a desert, so I had very little experience, and my first initial impressions are very different than what I think now. At first you're kind of lost. You think there's not much going on. There's just like it's very different to understand why people would want to be here all together, and now I'm wondering why I want to leave. So so there's that.
Yeah, I think that residencies are such a great intervention because you arrive and you just have to figure out something new and join it to what you've done and where you're going. And so, it's going to be throwing a bit of a wrench into the next, phase. But I love that you put the work outside. I love
Mhm.
the story. I wrote that in the chat. But just the idea of using the building, the inside of the building, the outside of the building, sticking with you're a pretty superior handler of that old-fashioned stuff, that oil paint with those silly brushes that we use, right? So just being able to
Mhm.
throw that something illusionistic and responsive. Anyway,
Yeah.
just wanted to
Thanks.
say hi.
Thank you, Landon. Anybody else? Good question. There's a question, but I don't know if I can take it because nobody will hear it. I think Lisa might have to say something. No. Hi, Lisa.
Wanted to say hi and congratulate
Thank
you
you.
and yes, my congrats to you too, Bernard. What a perfect choice. What a perfect place for you to be there. And I love the way that you were able to show that inside outside and just carefully take us through your process. And even the moon shot, like the way that you created that abstraction, and there's kind of like, it's like a snow, what do they call it? Where there's two moons in that painting. So even
Hmm.
though you concerned about that being narrative. Just by that one little, just that little notation, you kind of create your own abstract form again out of it, you know? So anyway, just thank you, Bernard, for inviting Marion, and I'm so glad you've had such a wonderful time there.
Yeah, thanks.
And thank you, Lisa, for introducing us and everything you do with your residencies. It's very productive.
Yeah, it's really that's I echo your support, Marion, for just saying this, and Landon, this is so important for artists to have an experience outside of their own environment. And I think the way you've mapped it, Marion, by showing, this careful observation of the light, how it was very different from your own, and, coming to know all of the different color sheens, all of those things, and then how it's heightened your observation in a different direction. So, I mean, you could be the poster child for Bernard for showing why it's important to change locations, right? And not always be working from one location, but just really admire the care that you've put into this presentation. So,
Awesome.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. It's been a real pleasure having Marion here and having you present at a distance
You've
on
got
this.
Anna. Anna has her hand up.
Oh, Anna. Hi, Anna. You're muted. You might want to unmute yourself, Anna, so we can hear you.
I kept
Oh, there
doing
you go.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you so much for inviting me. It was so nice to see you again, Marion, and to admire this amazing work. You saw those effects. You're so gifted to be able to observe all those different light effects and be able to bring it to us on a painting. You are amazing. You're the best. I want to congratulate you
Thank you,
from
Anna.
the depth of my heart, and keep it up.
Thank
And
you.
I hope to see them, to see you and your paintings in life as well. Merry
Awesome. Thanks
Christmas,
for
all the best
being.
to you. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much,
Thanks for
Marion. Thank you
coming.
for the
You're
invitation.
welcome.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, ladies. Thank you. Bye-bye.
You're muted, Bernard.
Sorry. I gotta go to the doctor. Thanks to you all for being here, and we look forward to seeing you soon in person, either down here in Joshua Tree, Vancouver, or wherever else you are. And thank you for being here. Of course, thank you to Marion for this wonderful work and artist talk. Cheers.
Awesome. Thanks. Ciao, everybody.